Ashe, and welcome to another special episode of our Mandatory Mental Liberation Message series, written and produced by our esteemed elder Baba Jelani Bomani Dembe, the brilliant founder of Majestic Mind Matters University. I'm your royal narrator, Queen Magical Melanin, for this new episode. The necessity of the Mandatory Mental Liberation series at Majestic Mind Matters University lies in our focus on serving our melanin-rich culture nation. By addressing the importance of knowledge of self to produce greater self-awareness and advocating for our mental liberation, especially for our precious melanin-rich culture children, our messages aim to combat the enduring effects of generational mental enslavement stemming from the historical trauma of the chattel enslavement of the ancestors. Our initiative seeks to empower us to break free from these harmful and unfavorable legacies and cultivate a deep-rooted sense of self-identity and unwavering resilience. Each moment you spend with us is a gift, a chance to grow, to learn, to be inspired. So stay with us till the end, where the real magic happens. Now, let's get started with this very special melanin-rich culture message titled Oppression and the Urgent Need for Cultural Reclamation, a Call to Stay Woke. In our collective consciousness, we are reminded daily that the chains of oppression are not confined to the past. The vestiges of colonialism, slavery, and systemic racism shape our realities as melanin-rich people. We, as a global community, find ourselves echoing the call to stay woke, to remain aware and vigilant against the forces that seek to shatter our identities and fracture our unity. In asserting our rightful place in history and culture, we are simultaneously reclaiming our melanin-rich heritage, an act of mandatory mental liberation not only for ourselves, but crucially for our children. The term, Sunken Place, popularized by Jordan Peele's acclaimed film, Get Out, serves as a harrowing metaphor for our current existence. Too often, we find ourselves in a state of disconnection from our authentic selves, subjected to the mental imprisonment fostered by a society that thrives on our subjugation. This state of being, a metaphorical, sunken place, is indicative of the internalized oppression we face, where our very essence and culture are diminished to mere shadows of their former glory. As we navigate this labyrinth, we must marry within our race, regaining the strength and unity that our ancestors once embodied. Our historical motherland, indigenously called Alkebulan, is our rightful home, a birthplace of civilization that demands our reverence and reclamation. This reclamation of our identity is not merely a matter of pride, it is a necessity for the mental liberation of our children. To shield them from systemic racism, discrimination, and oppression, we must immerse them in the richness of our heritage, honoring the spiritual roots that anchor us in a turbulent world. We must reject the divisive and oppressive religions imposed upon us by outsiders and gravitate towards our original spiritual practices that fortify our beliefs and communal bonds. Those suffering from the horrors of chattel enslavement deserve to be memorialized, their spirits recognized not merely as footnotes in a history book, but as pillars of our identity, our resilience, and our relentless spirit. In our current society, Stockholm Syndrome manifests in perplexing ways, rendering us unwitting accomplices in our own oppression. We grapple with drapetomania, a term used historically to pathologize the desire of enslaved individuals to escape. This term embodies the systemic labeling that continues to redefine us today, linking our pursuit of freedom and self-awareness to abnormalities as perceived by colonial standards. The linguistic constructs imposed upon us, terms like Black people, brown people, African, and people of color, serve as tools for further division. Such identifiers emerge from the colonizers' desire to homogenize and catalog our diverse experiences, chipping away at the fabric of our identity. As we navigate the global landscape, we must contend with the racial microaggressions that have become increasingly covert. Discrimination now often masquerades under the guise of hidden societal norms and practices. We find our melanin-rich culture marginalized, our voices drowned out in spaces meant for dialogue. The time has come for us not to accept empty symbolism in exchange for our votes. We demand tangibles, real change that addresses the systemic inequities plaguing our communities and affording us the dignity we rightfully deserve. An example of this can be gleaned from our collective movements advocating for reparations, where we no longer shy away from addressing the historical and ongoing injustices aimed at our people. Meritorious manumission, the practice of granting freedom to enslaved people for good behavior, finds its echoes in contemporary social dynamics, where inclusion is often extended to a select few at the expense of systemic change that benefits us as a whole. We must confront the realities of having our identities forcibly stripped away, leaving us fragmented, caught in a struggle to rediscover ourselves amid a society that often prefers us silent and compliant. Wokeness, rooted in our cultural vernacular, calls us to remain aware of injustice, forging our paths to empowerment and liberation. However, this awakening necessitates more than passive observation. We must act collectively to dismantle the oppressive structures still haunting our communities. Our legacy, our shared experiences, and our call to unity are not just for ourselves, they are imperatives for the next generation. As we champion the cause of mental liberation, let us strive together to elevate our ancestral voices, continuing the journey toward reclamation that defines our existence. Together, we will stay woke and reclaim our rightful place in the narrative of humanity. Our next topic in this special Majestic Mind Matters University Mandatory Mental Liberation Message series is titled, Reclaiming Our Cultural Identity and Heritage, a Collective Path to Liberation. In a world that often seeks to erase or diminish our melanin-rich history and contributions, it is imperative that we, as a united collective, actively work to reclaim our cultural identity and heritage. The oppressive structures that perpetuate racism and social injustice affect us all, impacting our children's mental liberation and sense of self. Thus, our reclamation is not merely an act of cultural revival, it is a necessary fight for the liberation of our children's souls and minds, a journey towards healing that must be pursued without hesitation. The adverse effects of systemic oppression are profound, embedding themselves in our daily lives through psychological trauma, identity crisis, and a disconnection from our rich heritage. We are continually reminded of our subjugation through societal norms that propagate stereotypes and utilize language that divides us. Terms like Black people, people of color, and even African have been employed by colonizers to perpetuate a sense of alienation from our true identity, a strategy designed to dilute our collective power. We must confront the notion of Stockholm Syndrome that impacts our community, causing feelings of loyalty to the very systems that oppress us. This psychological phenomenon has led to ambivalence toward our own identity and has historically manifested in actions that prioritize the acceptance and validation of oppressive structures over the reclamation of our heritage. One glaring example of this impact is the pervasive illusion of meritorious manumission, where compliance or exceptionalism is seen as a pathway to freedom, further embedding a false hierarchy within our ranks. The films of Jordan Peele, such as Get Out, 2017, and Us, 2019, serve as contemporary reflections of our realities. They navigate the psychological complexities of racism and highlight the subtle, often covert forms of oppression that persist today. In Get Out, the horrifying commodification of Black bodies underscores the lengths to which systemic oppression will go to maintain control and ownership over our identity. The juxtaposition of supernatural elements with situations that mirror our lived experiences forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about racism's behavioral manifestations. Our reclamation must also encompass a return to our roots. The term Alkebulan symbolizes our ancestral homeland and serves as a reminder of our civilization's origin. By embracing our unique spirituality and history, we can create a foundation of strength that honors our ancestors. These ancestors endured unimaginable horrors, including the brutality of chattel slavery, and we must continue to memorialize their struggles and achievements to prevent their sacrifices from being forgotten. As we traverse our historical context, we recognize the devastating psycho-cultural transformation that occurred when we were forcibly severed from our identities. Our stolen heritage has compelled us to surrender aspects of our self-identity, leading to a complex narrative of dislocation. We must educate ourselves and our children about the richness of our culture, and we must ensure that our children understand who they are, descendants of kings and queens, inventors, innovators, and warriors. The urgency to recover our cultural identity cannot be overstated. We must galvanize a global movement that transcends geographic borders, promoting unity among all melanin-rich cultures. We must unite to reject empty symbols and demand tangible reparations for our communities. Our power lies in our collective voice, and we must mobilize that voice for genuine change, as illustrated by movements advocating for economic empowerment and political representation rooted in our values and heritage. Together, we must challenge the false narratives that perpetuate division and discrimination. We must foster environments where our melanin-rich children can thrive, armed with knowledge of self and a strong cultural foundation. Our liberation is intrinsically tied to our understanding of past injustices and our commitment to not only remembering, but also honoring those who came before us. We will reclaim our identity and heritage by acknowledging our struggles, remembering our ancestors, and advocating for our rightful place in history. As we do so, we remind ourselves and the world that the legacy of our melanin-rich civilization is not one of shame, but of resilience and brilliance. Through education, unity, and unwavering commitment, we will rise stronger and more connected, paving the way for our children to embrace a future that honors their rich heritage. In this journey, we must stay woke, aware, and ready to forge a path toward healing and reclamation, embracing every step as a vital act of liberation. Our next topic in this special Majestic Mind Matters University Mandatory Mental Liberation Message series is titled, Fostering Unity Against Systemic Racism and Oppression Through Cultural Reclamation. In our collective pursuit to combat the enduring effects of systemic racism and oppression, it is essential that we engage in meaningful dialogue about our shared history, ancestral roots, and spiritual practices. We hold the responsibility to foster unity among our communities globally, as our melanin-rich culture has a profound legacy that must be honored and reclaimed for the mental liberation of our children. This reclamation is not merely a cultural exercise, it is a necessary step for our community's survival and success, especially considering the pervasive modern manifestations of oppression that affect us daily. The effects of systemic racism are ubiquitous, manifesting in myriad social, economic, and psychological forms. We find ourselves adversely impacted by a societal framework that utilizes terms like Black people, brown people, and people of color as tools of division and control. This divisive labeling perpetuates social discrimination and neglects the rich histories and cultures embedded within our identities. These terms arose from the colonizer systems, which sought to further oppress and alienate us from our true selves. Instead of acknowledging our rich cultural heritage, the dominant narrative often reduces us to mere statistics in a grander scheme of subjugation. Furthermore, we are confronted with manifestations of psychological trauma rooted in our collective experience of chattel enslavement and ongoing oppression. The term drapetomania exemplifies the twisted rationale employed by oppressors to label anyone who sought freedom as mentally ill. This historical distortion affects our current psyche as we navigate a world that consistently attempts to dehumanize us. The impact of Stockholm Syndrome is also evident, with many in our community finding themselves subconsciously aligned with their oppressors, adopting their viewpoints as a survival mechanism. Engaging with the works of contemporary filmmakers like Jordan Peele sheds light on these psychological effects and social injustices. His films, such as Get Out and Us, expose the subtle yet powerful ways racism permeates our lives. Get Out masterfully illustrates the exploitation of our bodies and identities under the guise of benign relationships, while Us touches on the internalized fear and fragmentation of self that arise from systemic discrimination. Through art, he compels us to confront uncomfortable truths, challenging us to awaken to the realities we may have otherwise accepted. We must unite to reclaim our melanin-rich culture and civilization, prioritizing the honor and protection of our women, children, elderly, and disabled. It is essential for us to reject the oppressors' religions and cultural narratives that fracture our understanding of self. Instead, we embrace our original spiritual practices, deeply connected to our ancestors, whose legacies of resilience and strength continue to resonate within us. We memorialize those whose names have been lost to history, individuals who suffered at the hands of oppressive forces, and we recognize the profound impact of their sacrifices on our current struggles. In the political arena, we are no longer willing to accept empty symbols and rhetoric in exchange for our votes. Our demands are tangible and prioritize the needs of our community, as seen in movements advocating for reparations. This is not only a matter of justice, but a reclamation of our identity and legacy. The concept of meritorious manumission serves as a reminder of the continuing examples of conditional freedom and recognition within our society, where benefits are often given only in exchange for loyalty or conformist behavior, perpetuating the cycle of oppression. As we collectively insist on our liberation, it is crucial that we redefine what it means to stay woke. This concept, with roots in African American vernacular English, speaks to our awareness of social injustices and our commitment to fight against them. It is about the awakening of our communities to the realities that have long been ignored and the unearthing of our collective identities that were forcibly suppressed. Let us understand that to truly foster unity among our global community requires an unwavering commitment to our rich ancestry, an honoring of our spiritual practices, and a fierce determination to combat the oppressive structures that seek to divide us. Through remembrance and reclamation, we can pave the way for our next generations, ensuring they carry with them the strength and wisdom of our melanin-rich heritage. The conclusion topic in this special Majestic Mind Matters University Mandatory Mental Liberation Message series is titled, Dismantling Modern Manifestations of Meritorious Manumission and Reclaiming Our Heritage. In our shared journey towards liberation and empowerment, it is imperative that we engage deeply with the legacies of oppression that continue to plague our melanin-rich communities. Meritorious manumission, a term rooted in the historical context of slavery where enslaved individuals attempted to gain freedom through acts of loyalty or service to their oppressors, has evolved into modern manifestations that insidiously infiltrate our lives. Today, we must take specific and actionable steps to address these remnants of systemic oppression, ensuring that we prioritize tangible benefits for our communities rather than merely accepting symbolic gestures from external entities. The detrimental effects of oppression ripple throughout our lives, manifesting in myriad ways that erode our identity, culture, and familial bonds. We recognize that the struggles we face as a melanin-rich civilization are not confined to the past. They are woven into the very fabric of our existence today. Movies produced by creators like Jordan Peele, such as Get Out, 2017, and Us, 2019, serve as potent reminders of the psychological effects of social injustice and racial trauma. They illustrate how systemic racism shapes our experiences, reinforcing the urgency of cultivating a mindset rooted in awareness and resilience, encapsulated in the call to stay woke. Furthermore, we must reclaim our melanin-rich cultural heritage, a critical act for the mandatory mental liberation of our precious children. As stewards of our civilization, it is essential that we honor our ancestors and the history that defined them. We must embrace our heritage to enrich the lives of today's youth, fostering a sense of belonging and identity that is increasingly eroded in a world fueled by colonial narratives. It is vital that we remember the horrors of chattel enslavement and memorialize not only the known heroes of our past, but also the countless unnamed ancestors whose sacrifices have largely gone unrecognized. The impact of Stockholm Syndrome, a psychological phenomenon where hostages or victims sympathize with their captors, reflects a broader societal condition that ensnares many of us today. This condition acts as a barrier to our full liberation, compelling us to conform to the demands and expectations set forth by dominant narratives and external forces. Similarly, the historical concept of drapetomania, an unfortunate attempt by enslavers to pathologize the desire for freedom among enslaved people, reminds us of the relentless efforts to dehumanize and control us. Such insidious ideologies continue to echo in contemporary settings where the language and labels imposed upon us, terms like people of color, African, or Black, serve to fracture our unity and obscure our identity. The racism and discrimination that afflict us on a global scale manifest as a quiet yet persistent force, often more covert than in previous generations. We, as melanin-rich individuals, are engaged in a daily battle against these invisible systems that seek to diminish our worth, both individually and collectively. The time has come for us to reject empty symbolism in exchange for our valuable votes. We demand tangible commitments to our communities. For instance, the recent surge of political candidates and corporations promoting diversity initiatives often falls flat without corresponding actions and resources directed towards improving the socioeconomic conditions of our neighborhoods. Meritorious manumission is still in effect today, as evidenced by the continued expectation that successful individuals from our communities are to act as tokens or symbols of diversity in predominantly white spaces while the broader societal injustices persist unchallenged. This expectation reinforces the notion that the burden of representation lies solely on our shoulders, rather than addressing the systemic inequalities that necessitate such representation. As stewards of our future, we must actively foster relationships within our communities. Our unity serves as a foundation for our strength. We must marry within our own race, rebuilding familial and communal ties that have been systematically destabilized. Together, we honor and uplift our melanin-rich culture men who stand steadfastly in support of our women and children, forming a protective shield against the pervasive forces of oppression. Engaging with the tenets of our rich cultural heritage and striving for mental liberation is not merely an act of remembrance, it is a conscious choice to commit to our empowerment. As we navigate the complexities of our struggles, we are reminded that our destiny is interwoven with reclaiming our history, challenging the external oppressors, and fostering a new generation deeply rooted in self-knowledge and awareness. By doing so, we give our children the tools they need to thrive in a world that, while steeped in challenges, also offers a fertile ground for reclamation and renaissance. Our time is now. Stay woke, and let us stand together as we build a future worthy of our ancestors' dreams. I'm your royal narrator, Queen Magical Melanin. We trust that this very special message has expanded your understanding through the insights shared by our highly esteemed producer, Elder Baba Jelani Bomani Dembe, founder of Majestic Mind Matters University, in our Mandatory Mental Liberation Series special message. Remember this, it is essential to honor the ancestors. We have a unique connection to the ancestors. They endured many unwarranted struggles, preserved our melanin-rich culture, and passed down invaluable wisdom through many generations. By honoring the ancestors, we pay honorable tribute to our roots and draw great strength and much-needed inspiration from the unwavering resilience and royal legacy that has paved the way for our present and future generations. Ancestral reverence is a powerful way for us to continually uphold our own melanin-rich identity, heritage, and cultural legacy. Here is an ancient Alkebulan proverb to keep in mind. If you think you are too small to make a difference, you have not spent the night with a mosquito. Remember this as well, whenever you are in the presence of anyone, saying, "They don't see color," it actually means, "They don't see you." We acknowledge and honor the indigenous name of our glorious continent as Alkebulan. This name means Mother of Mankind in various Alkebulan languages such as Akuyu, Swahili, and Kemet, referring to ancient Egypt, and rejecting the terms Africa or African. As royal members of our melanin-rich culture nation, we must strive for knowledge of self for greater personal awareness. Always treat yourself kindly and seek to live a totally awesome and gloriously fulfilling melanin-rich culture life. The only way to do great work is to love what you do. So, like, subscribe to stay updated, and share this very special melanin-rich culture link with everyone that you care about and that really cares about you and all of yours as well. And thank you for listening to this enchanting special message. Stay woke. Ashe.